Last week, I did the top 5 most brutal shmups on the PC Engine, the king of shooters during the 16-bit era. And this week, we're following it up with the shmup king of the 32-bit era, the mighty Sega Saturn. During its heyday, the Saturn had near 60 shooters released for it, and dozens of near arcade-perfect ports. But which ones were the hardest, most brutal, infuriatingly difficult of the lot? We're about to find out, so let's get started. Let's start off with the elephant in the room, the legend of legends. Not many games have more of a following, both loved and despised, than Battle Garegga. This game will humble anyone who doesn't approach it with the proper strategy that it demands. And that's because Battle Garegga uses a rank system that gets harder and harder to the point of impossible if you play the game too well. You heard that right. In Garegga, you have to purposefully control how well you do, or the game will mop the floor with you. The more power-ups you get, the higher your score, the more lives and bombs you save up, the harder the game gets. The enemy bullets increase in volume and speed, and their armor increases, to the point where the later levels become impossible. And speaking of bullets, I'd be remiss not to mention these obnoxious little things. If the game wasn't naturally hard enough, the bullets actually look like bullets, as in small, thin, dark, blending with the background kind of bullets. It's so hard to distinguish them that eventually Raizing released a version with highlighted bullets to make them easier to see. And when your rank gets a bit too high, these bullets zip across the screen about as fast as the real thing. So back to the rank system. To keep your rank low, you have to purposefully adjust how you play. Power up to survive, but not too much. Don't hoard those bombs, use them up. Don't stock lives, because what Garegga giveth, Garegga taketh away. And once you reach that point of no return, there's only one way to get the game back to a manageable level. You die. And that's what seasoned players do. They die on purpose, because if they don't, the game will make sure you do at its own discretion. You can see here that it's decided that my ass needs to be kicked. To 1cc this game, you have to manage the rank like a pro, and I'm no pro at this one. It took me a good few continues on the default arcade mode to battle through it. I didn't manage my rank well enough, and as you can see on these later levels, I paid the price. But at least it made for some fun footage of me avoiding my inevitable demise. The final boss form just throws all forms of physics out the window and turns into a stark raving lunatic, hopping around the screen like a jackalope in heat. All I could do was unload my one bomb after each death and pray it went down before I ran out of continues. Certainly not my finest moment, but I was happy to make it through it all after letting my rank grow way too high. When not played correctly, what this game throws at you is completely insane. Would I consider Battle Garegga the hardest shooter I ever had to beat? As far as playing on standard arcade mode, no 1cc, no loops, I wouldn't say that. You get a generous helping of continues and you respawn where you die, so it's not as unforgiving as something like Tatsujin. I was able to credit spam my way to victory on that final section. If you can play well enough to reach level 5 with your continues intact, and can play at least semi-competently from that point forward, it is possible to fumble your way through while burning up the rest of your continues. Played properly, Garegga is possibly the hardest shooter to master, because simply beating the game and looking bad while doing it like I did isn't the goal here. Garegga is so unbelievably deep and obtuse in not telling you how it works, that to actually master the game in 1cc it is probably one of the most impressive feats in any shooting game. Garegga is so unbelievably deep. I can't even imagine having gotten through those final 2 stages on a single credit and no continues. Had I understood the rank system better and had tons more practice, maybe it would have been more manageable. And that's what makes Garegga not just the hardest game on the Saturn, but unanimously ranked as one of the hardest of all time. Make no mistake, this game is a beast, and properly clearing it is a feat that very few have achieved. But damn if getting your ass handed to you has ever been more fun. I wasn't originally going to include this next one, and not because it doesn't deserve it, but because it has so many special versions that are even harder than the original. But even in this form, it is one of the most brutal games to clear, right next to Battle Garegga. It also happens to be one of the greatest bullet hell shmups of all time, and that game is DoDonpachi. This game is so legendary that countless more brutal variants were later released by Cave, but even in its original form, this is one hell of a hard game, at least on the proper arcade mode. The Saturn mode is toned down a bit, an easier version for beginners. Unlike some other bullet hell shmups, there's little slowdown in the oncoming onslaught of bullets here, and what is there is very subtle. You'll need to memorize locations of most enemies so you can take them out before they spray the screen with a near undodgeable amount of bullets. Your own ship slows down while using the laser, which is a necessity to weave your way through some of the more complex patterns thrown at you by the massive bosses. And boy do they throw everything in the kitchen sink at you. Level 3 really ramps it up and starts to put your skills to the test, throwing a lot more bullets at you. It gets pretty hairy in a couple spots where I often waste a bomb or two making it through. The boss is more complex, but still manageable with clear openings to work your way through the patterns. To level 4, you won't get much further without having mastered the basics and the best way to avoid certain bullet spreads. Unless you're a veteran of this game and playing for score, you better clear those large enemies out quickly before they fill the screen with an impossible sea of bullets. And as of this boss, DDP ain't messing around. It litters the screen and you better know the patterns or you'll be burning through lives faster than a Russian gulag in a Siberian winter. But this next level is, at least for me, where all hell breaks loose and I inevitably use up multiple bombs and likely a life working my way through this gauntlet of madness. Bullets spray from every direction, often at varying speeds, and the only way for me to survive is unloading my bombs whenever necessary and burning through a life as well. Then the boss hits and woof! By this time, I'm definitely over it. I just unload my bombs until it switches to its next phase, which thankfully is much easier and a cinch to dodge by comparison. It does look freaking cool though, but I also knew to save one last bomb for the final phase because it's a whore of the priciest sort, spraying the screen like a preteen on Pornhub. Again, I'm over it. Soon as I see that spray barreling toward me, I unload my last bomb and this asshole can eat shit and die. And boy will that cost me on the next level, where the onslaught reaches a new meaning of blissful death. Inevitably, I have to lose a life here and get a full stock of bombs back to help plow my way through this gauntlet of fire and brimstone, before reaching the next brutal section and wasting more bombs to keep from dying again. Then along comes what will be the end of the line, at least for me. The bullets fly hard and fast with this boss, and you better know the patterns like the back of your hand or you're going down in flames. I'm by no means a DDP expert and barely survive by the skin of my teeth. It unleashes holy hell, and I'm left with no choice but to unload on this SOB and finish it off. And that's the end of the road for me. I'm actually not sure what this dude is telling me, most likely that I'm not good enough to deserve seeing the true end boss, and to go back and get gooder. And he's likely right, as that giant bee would have ended me with a level of ass whooping I wasn't quite ready to receive. Did I have enough continues left to unload and beat it as well? Yeah, maybe, but that's not what DDP is about. It's about seeing how insanely high you can score on a single credit, and on those terms, I'm still a novice in training. My advice, don't let that stop you from playing this amazing game, no matter how far you can make it. It may kick your ass 3 ways from Sunday and expose you for the scrub you are, but there are few more thrilling ways to get your ass handed to you than like playing some DDP. How do you follow up one of the hardest and greatest shooters of all time with another famous shmup that many feel is the finest on the system, exclusive to the arcade and the Saturn, Radiant Silvergun? Now, whether one considers it one of the hardest on the system will all depend on what you define as hard. This game is epic in its presentation, its music, its weapon and chain system, and its creativity. It's also epically long. Epically, brutally, almost mind-numbingly long. At least for a shmup it is. Somewhere near an hour into the game, I began to wonder if it was misclassified as a shmup instead of an RPG. It's not that it's not brilliantly executed, it is, but it keeps going, and going, and going, and going. Like a Lord of the Rings marathon where after finally delivering the ring to Mount Doom, you think you're done, but no. You still have 20 minutes of Frodo and Sam making googly eyes at each other when all you want to do is take a piss that you've been holding for the last hour and a half after downing a supersized Mountain Dew. The boss runs in this game just never seem to end. Playing through Silvergun, I had to pause and come back to it twice, and it was somewhere on stage 6-50, while battling with the space whale followed by the giant turtle, where I realized that if I keep going, this video isn't going to get done in time. So RSG now has the clear distinction of being the first game in the series that I didn't play through to completion for the review. I'd beaten it before long ago, and now I remember why I hadn't come back to it again. For me personally, it's just a slog. A brilliantly executed slog, mind you, like a movie that's clearly amazing on every technical level, but the director just refused to spend time in the editing room to streamline the experience. Now, to be fair, part of it is my fault. I should have gotten my bearings first before playing a couple levels and recording, as I didn't properly level up my weapons like a good playthrough should. And boy did I pay for it. As if the game wasn't long enough, going up against the later bosses with a weak weapon makes the encounters last forever. The bosses, of which there are too many to count, take ages to finally die. Some I got through with self-destruct because I just couldn't put enough bullets into them in time. Literally, the bosses gave up before I did, waiting for me to finish them off and just off themselves from the sheer monotony of trying to kill me. Back on point though, Silvergun isn't just hard from its incredible length, but also from its significant time investment of mastery. You have several different weapons at your disposal at all times, so better get used to using all 6 of those Saturn buttons on top of the trigger for your sword, which is easily my favorite aspect of the game. Soaking up incoming bullets to unleash a massive sword swipe at just the right moment takes the place of screen clearing bombs and infuses an awesome strategy into the gameplay. Each of the areas and bosses is like a small puzzle, with an easy way and many other harder ways to work through it. A skilled player can breeze through most of this game, having completely mastered the weapons and how to best clear each area. But make no mistake, that mastery came at the cost of an incredible time investment to learn every nook and cranny of the game. And in Silvergun, it's essential, as your ship speed is quite slow, and simply maneuvering your way out of incorrectly attacking an area or a boss isn't often possible. Expect plenty of trial and error with this one. In the end, I admit that the game is technically brilliant, but it's also not for everyone. For me, shooters are that quick burst of pulse-pounding adrenaline that I can sit and enjoy for 30 to 40 minutes tops. So endurance loops that last for hours on end are not for me. I just want my quick hit of that crack pipe a couple times a day. Radiant Silvergun is like an enduro race, the 24 hours of Le Mans. Maybe next playthrough I'll level my weapons properly, and once the bosses go down much faster, I may find it a bit more tolerable to complete. But for this playthrough and still having 3 more games to complete and a video by end of the week, ain't no one got time for that. Oh, it's over. Alright then, let's move on. My next pick was a no-brainer, as it's widely considered by many one of the harder shmups on the Saturn. But what I love about this one is it's also a hidden gem that I get to showcase for anyone that hasn't played it yet. It takes ideas from some of the greats, like Layer Section and its unique lock-on mechanic, but it's a whole lot tougher, and in my opinion, one of the coolest games on the Saturn, and that is Soukyugurentai, or Souky for short. Souky is all about risk-reward between waiting long enough to lock on and unleash heat-seeking death and getting too greedy and getting punished for it. You can't use your forward-firing weapon while you're locked on, so simply hanging out and locking on to everything can result in an undodgeable spread of bullets coming your way before you take those enemies out. Once you hit level 3, this game picks up and will dole out helpings of ass-whooping in short order until you master the mechanics. It's so much damn fun to play that no matter how hard it seems at first, sticking with it will reward you with some of the coolest gameplay moments that you'll see on the Saturn. There's a great sense of scale as you swoop down at the tiny enemies from above, raining fiery napalm of death onto the cannon fodder below. But as you approach, they grow larger in size, until finally they dwarf your tiny ship, and you're forced to take them on at a clear disadvantage. Check out this cool stage with asteroids and some kind of alien spawn trying to chase you down. Oh, and this section here, hey Souky, Irem called and they want their penalty zone back. Image fight anyone? Shameless. But on the bright side, at least I'm not stuck with a pea shooter trying to navigate that hell. And man, what a kick-ass boss on this level with those massive reflex cannons. This is my favorite dude, outside of the final boss, which we get to later. Once you reach this stage, you've got submarines and turrets popping up from every corner of the screen as it scrolls both vertically and horizontally, revealing more and more enemies to stream bullets in your direction. While it may not get as crazy as games like DDP or Garegga, these bullets also move fast, and your ship, not so much. So it's easy to get trapped with no escape. And that's what your handy-dandy screen-clearing bombs are for, so use them wisely. This stage is particularly brutal and will eat up lives like nobody's business. And the boss? No pushover either. Now let's start off the final level with a barrage of yet more reflex cannons that can easily steal any lives that you've been hoarding. Follow that up with waves of large enemies that continue to fly up and blow their load in every direction as you desperately try to take them out before getting trapped if you do survive this dastardly level, as well as a guardian to filter out any remaining lives you may have left. You'll be treated to yet another guardian that isn't too tough, but has 6 laser cannons to keep you honest, and look pretty cool doing it. And it's actually the first part of a brilliant final boss run that's a masterclass in killer design, as you fly around portions of this massive air fortress, taking out one section at a time. It's one of my favorite shooter moments, with waves of enemies trying to take you down while you disable parts of the ship and ultimately cut off the head of the snake. Of course, in typical fashion, the true boss escapes. And now you've got another battle on your hands with a ship that's going to dole out some of your own medicine by locking onto you with the same type of cone and firing out fast-moving, heat-seeking lasers. It's a frantic, final-ditch effort to take you down. But if you've gotten this far and still have some bombs left in your bag, you can finish it off and claim your prize. Soukyugurentai is one of the least known and best games on the Saturn, and it's also not yet that expensive to buy. So if you're a fan of shooters, this one is a must play and will give you a run for your money as one of the toughest shmups on the Saturn. For my last pick, I could have gone a host of different ways, and I spent a long time deciding. There's a lot of really tough shooters on the Saturn, from Batsugun to Shenryu, Darius Gaiden, but none of them really stood out as a clear candidate that could stack up to the brutality of the first 4 picks. Then I got some really good advice from the Shmups forum, and after playing through it again, I agree 100%. Psikyo makes some hard-ass games, and they had some really good ones on the Saturn, like Sengoku Blade, Gunbird, and Strikers. That last one, Strikers 1945-2, ultimately got the nod, and after playing through it again, I think it's right on the money. This is my PS1 version, as I don't own it on the Saturn, so I use my RetroArch to play the Saturn version. And after doing so, no bones about it. Out of all the final picks I could have made, Strikers was definitely the right choice. This game was brutal as hell. First glance, it looks a bit like Battle Garegga, but it couldn't be farther from it in terms of gameplay. What makes this game so damn hard on the Saturn? Well, I had the distinct privilege of counting the ways. 1. This has to be the largest hitbox for the tiniest little plane that I've ever seen. You look like you can squeeze through anything, but the opposite is true. Working your way through bullets in this game is a matter of being just pixels away from death. In Garegga, there are plenty of moments where you could swear you got nailed, but somehow survived. Here, it's the opposite. I think I'm in the right spot, but the game says nope. I've always had a tough time with bullets in some Psikyo games, and Strikers was no exception. That brings us to 2, the bullets. Most carry an odd oblong shape instead of round, and always seem to tag you when anywhere in your vicinity, and they're fast as hell. Aside from the occasional slow spread, these things come flying at you at blinding speed, like Battle Garegga speed, only your plane is slower and there's no escaping these volleys. Your only option is to place yourself in the right spots and hope your hitbox doesn't get tagged. 3. Unless you play in Tate mode by turning your TV, you're stuck with a compressed original mode. I don't own this one on the Saturn, so I couldn't use my setup, having to play this on RetroArch on my PC. And if this damn game wasn't hard enough, playing in a compressed area with a screen that isn't the full height puts those incoming bullets right in your face with almost no room to dodge or get away. It's a nightmare, and it made an already hard game even harder. 4. Once you reach the later stages of the game, you can forget about continues. Oh, they're still there, but they put you back at the start of the level, so you've got your 3 stock of lives to make it through, the end. And that final level, holy hell in a handbasket. It took quite a few replays to figure out how to avoid some of that incoming firepower. Aside from this laundry list of bitching, the game itself is a lot of fun. The boss designs are super creative and always come in multiple parts to take down. Each plane has its own unique weapons and strategy, and while I can't speak for them all, I can on the TA-152 Fuckwolf. Yeah, you try pronouncing it differently. Its charge shot is an indestructible orb that slowly plows its way forward for big damage, but also acts as a shield to absorb fire. And it was absolutely essential for just about every tough section of the game. It saved my ass time and again, which is why I like this ship and have always used it. Oh, and check out this nifty trick that I panicked and randomly figured out to pass through these orbs here. You know I'll be using that one again on my next playthrough. but nothing will save you from the unfairness of the final boss playing in a compressed original Saturn mode and not in Tate. It spews bullets so fast, so close to your face, that only knowing where to expect them and being in the right spots will avoid certain death. And this dude has 3 forms, the final of which is an all-out blitz that put me back at the start more than once. Maybe in a proper Tate mode it's more reasonable, but with so little room, it felt borderline unfair. I found a corner strategy that let me avoid the worst of the attacks, and luckily, after much trial, I finally put this bastard to bed. What the hell is this? Did this shit just freeze? Motherfucker! In my moment of victory? Hell no! This counts! This counts, god damn it! Actually happened, and this shit is one reason PC emulators piss me off. But no matter, I think you got the gist of it. Cool ass game, bullets are hard as hell, it kicks your ass, and definitely try to play this in Tate mode, even if you have to get 3 friends to help you turn your 32-inch CRT sideways. Because this game is hard enough without handicapping yourself to a short screen like my dumbass did. There are plenty of hard-ass shmups on the Saturn, but if anyone thinks their choice is harder than Strikers 2, I'm not sure they've tried it on the Saturn original mode with a cut screen for an extra level of brutality. My original final pick was going to be an easy one, and that game was Image Fight, an incredibly brutal game that absolutely belongs on this list. But I already did it last video on the PC Engine, so I don't want to just duplicate it again. If you're interested, check it out on my top 5 most brutal PC Engine shmups. While you may not agree with all of my picks, it's probably safe to say that anyone who finds these games easy are likely people that never leave their houses. In fact, I want to thank everyone from the Saturn Junkyard to the Shmups Forum to all my friends on Instagram for all the great suggestions. Credit David Medina from the Saturn Junkyard for that little witticism there. So what console do we do next? Mega Drive? Neo Geo? Let me know in the comments, as well as what you thought of my picks. And if you haven't watched my first video yet on most brutal shmups for the PC Engine, definitely check it out right here, as it really kicks ass. And please, if you haven't yet, remember to click subscribe and hit the bell so you can get notified when I release my next in the series. And until then, smoke 'em if you got 'em.